don't smoke the seed. Cause if you smoke the seed, you're going to kill.
Hi. First questions first. What direction do you feel that cannabis reform should be taking at the moment?
Well, anything you can get really is the direction you take. You have to assess where you are in the scheme of things. You know, like in Spain, they've made these great amounts of progress. They have 200 clubs selling cannabis to citizens of Spain, so they've already come so far. So their objective now is to make more legal the production of marijuana and further broaden the privileges that the people who consume marijuana enjoy to those who produce it and sell it. And in Britain, it's a bigger distance to go. We don't have any kind of decriminalization. In fact, England went backward to some degree in 2009. So essentially, we need to establish the dignity of our culture, that it's fine to smoke marijuana. It's not a sin. It's not a vice. It's not a negative thing. It doesn't impair you. All these kind of negative stereotypes that exist out in the public need to be dispelled. And then when you're able to dispel that successfully and people are convinced that marijuana is not a sin or a vice and that the people who smoke it are good people, then you can proceed with the repeals of the bad legislation, the prohibition of marijuana. But, you know, things can only happen so fast. Marijuana doesn't legalize itself. The people have to legalize it, and that means they need to take political action. They need to be determined, and they can't be intimidated. Too many people know marijuana should be legalized, but when they get to a position of authority or respect in the public sphere, whether in business or in a profession or, you know, part of the establishment, then they stay silent because they're worried about the impact on their employment or their family and this sort of thing. And that's what we need to also overcome. We need people speaking who have knowledge and respect for cannabis but are currently staying silent.
What do you feel that cannabis activists in the UK can help to do to bring about change?
Well, you know, even though I'm not really allowed to advocate that people break the law in my speech tonight, to you I can say that a certain amount of civil disobedience is going to be required. There are other elements too. Principled civil disobedience done openly and transparently can be very effective, like holding a marijuana plant in front of a parliament or a legislature, or these kind of places with a very specific political impact. You can challenge them to arrest you with that plant. Maybe they'll ignore you, maybe they'll arrest you. But either way, you keep making your point all along that the law is essentially unjust and ought to be changed. And then there's the other thing, is opening shops and businesses, whether it's selling seeds or grow equipment or a hemp store selling bongs or pipes. The more business people we have in our culture, the more money we have circulating that we can use for political activity. And so all these things are very important. Advocating, being a good example ourselves when we're out there, getting politically involved, like actually voting. A lot of our people don't vote, they're cynical, they're skeptical. Participating in the cannabis culture businesses, whether legal or illegal, but all these things are important to develop a community. And once you have a good, cohesive, developed community, it becomes more obtainable, these political objectives, to legalize or decriminalize.
What do you feel that it would take to break the empathy of some people have about getting involved with the activism and taking it to the next level?
Well, one of the problems for Britain was that it was too close to Amsterdam, and that's been corrupting. Over the years, people thought, well, it doesn't really matter if it's legal in Britain because we can go over to Amsterdam and buy our hash or buy what we want and bring it back, and you don't really get in much of a trouble. So for years, Britain lagged behind growing marijuana. It's only a recent phenomenon in Britain that people can grow their own marijuana. I was speaking to people in Britain 10 years ago who complained about the grit weed that was being sold around and the soap bar crappy hash that was coming from Morocco. And I asked them, I said, well, doesn't anybody grow their own marijuana there? And they said, no, we usually get it from Europe, like Amsterdam. And I thought, well, that's a critical problem, because if more people are growing it, there's going to be a lot better weed available more immediately. And I said, and also, I was surprised that people didn't know these dealers when they complained about the dealers are selling grit weed. I said, well, don't you know who these people are? Why are they allowed to sell this? Why wouldn't they be beat up or dealt with or even spoken to? Because who is patronizing people who are selling, you know, garbage? So then I realized that Britain had a long way to go to get hold of its own destiny in regards to cannabis culture, so that now people are growing marijuana here. And the marijuana has been very good that we smoked in Scotland and Ireland. Excellent, actually. And these are strains that are as good as anything in Amsterdam, or for that matter in Spain. So that is occurring, and that's a very good thing. Because once people get a lot of experience with good marijuana and growing good marijuana, they become more organized as a culture. And so these things are good improvements. There's lots of things going on in England and Scotland and Ireland that are very positive. And I think it's possible to legalize cannabis within 5 to 7 years, because right now you've got a wave of worldwide opinion going in that direction. You've got progress happening in Austria, in Spain, progress has occurred in Portugal, though they're a little stalled now. You've got Uruguay legalizing marijuana, it's going to be $1 a gram, right? That will undercut the entire black market of South America, so that'll be an interesting experiment. You've got Colorado, where people can grow their own plants, and that will guarantee that the price never gets too high. But even then, people are coming from other states just to buy marijuana legally and pay those taxes, and even those high prices, just to demonstrate how much support they have for legal marijuana. And then in Canada, we have an interesting experiment next year. We have a federal election where the normal governing party, the Liberal Party of Canada, who's been our government for most of Canada's history, has pledged full legalization. And the leader is not only going to implement full legalization, but expunge all the criminal records of the 2 million Canadians that have marijuana convictions, a very important condition we've always wanted. And Jodie is going to be, hopefully, the candidate in Vancouver East for that governing party, and will hopefully be a good advisor to the people who come up with the final policy. So there's lots going on even in Canada, and even in Vancouver we have 50 shops selling medical marijuana, and they're pushing the envelope a lot. There might be some pullback by the police in that regard, but there's a dynamic activity happening in Canada. A lot of Canadians are willing to break the law to open lounges for smoking in their community, or dispensaries and what have you like that. So it depends. And then in some places like Australia, there's no progress at all, even though there should be. But but most of the world is moving forward, and this is going to help Great Britain and Ireland a lot, because it's an intellectual wave this time. And the intellectual wave is going to start affecting doctors and politicians and intellectuals and philosophers, and not just the people who consume cannabis.
Do you feel like prison has changed you, and if so, for better or for worse?
Oh, it didn't change me at all, but I'm lucky in that way. When prison changes someone, they could have an epiphany. And I was sent to jail for 3 months for passing a joint in Saskatchewan in 2004. I had many more epiphanies there, because everybody in that prison, Saskatoon Correctional, was a native person. And I was one of the few white people in there. And I really felt sorry for a lot of them, because they had deep-rooted problems with alcohol or hard drugs. And so I was able to learn a lot from them. And at times, in that prison, I felt lucky. I thought a 3-month sentence was incredibly long. Little did I know that I would do a sentence 26 times longer than what I served in some distant prison in the United States of a much more substantial variety. But I actually had kind of a positive impact on that prison in the time I was there. I mean, if the object of life is to bring light to wherever we go and try and improve wherever you are, whether it's in prison, then to that degree I was able to improve the livelihood of many people there. I brought in hundreds of books for people.
Okay.
I was in a rock and roll band. I became a musician, which was incredibly soul nurturing. Jodie visited me 81 times and all that, though, and that's 165 days she visited me. That's actually 6 hours a day for 165 days. Is 5.5 months of someone's life that she came visiting me. And then she spent the same amount of time traveling to see me, 5.5 months of her life just traveling. A whole day to get to see me, 2 days visit, and then a whole day to go back. So in one sense, it gave me a real eye-opening look at what it costs to be a prisoner. It cost Jodie a fortune. All her money was being used to come and visit me and give me money to get enough food in prison. Even email. We had a primitive email system in the prison. It was $3 an hour, and at 3.5 hours a day, we used a lot. I spent $18,000 in 4 years. I was in the 4.5 years I was in federal prison. So just email alone for 4 years cost $18,000. Food was more money. I mean, so families of people with people who are in prison for drugs, it's a very difficult thing. It drains all your money, drains all your heart. Endless traveling to visit them. And I was 2,500 kilometers away from where Jodie is in Vancouver.
We were the lucky ones. Most people don't get visits.
Yeah, most people don't even get visits because it's just not affordable, it's not practical. And it's kind of customary to actually forget family members in prison in a lot of ways, because there's a sense of helplessness about it too. And in my 5-year prison sentence for sending seeds, although there was an explanation by the drug czar, or Karen Tandy, the head of the Drug Enforcement Administration, she said in the press release on the day of my arrest that it was all about my legalization activities, right? So my whole case is extraordinary. Television shows I was on often aired in the prison. And so I got credibility by appearing in the media in a good way with these prisoners. So I tended to get treated special by them, actually.
And Jodie, how did Marc's incarceration affect you?
Well, I took over the business and grew it from 19 to 28 employees. As he said, I visited him all the time. At first it was every weekend, and then for years it was a schedule of 10 days at home, 4 days away, 10 days home. So very exhausting. Worked in a lot of news media appearances, speaking at rallies and conferences throughout Canada and the United States. Really developed into my own activist, expected to fill his shoes in his absence. So I had the privilege of speaking to Canadian University press conferences, investors conferences, big thinking minds conferences with former prime ministers, and all sorts of fascinating events I was asked to speak at to share the message of ending prohibition and protecting other people from the suffering that prohibition causes. So for me, I grew up a lot. I became very independent, strong woman all on my own, and had a lot of support from people and admiration from women especially, telling me that was very inspiring and that they really looked up to me for having done that. And a lot of people who were going to lose loved ones to prison who said that they hoped they could do the same. So I was very fortunate to have support from a lot of people. Every day I received messages of encouragement and thanks and support from everyone everywhere. So I always gave thanks for being in a special position and trying to pass that strength on to others as well.
I was reading an article stating that the world needs more women in the legalization movement. I just wanted to understand your opinion on it, see if you agree with that statement, and if so, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's generally accepted that women are underrepresented in every which way, in the workplace and government and many different areas of film and business and CEO positions. I mean, women are still struggling for equality and representation in many ways. So that's always something that we're going to have on our shoulders. But women have often carried a lot on our shoulders from families and children and work and a lot of nurturing and raising people. But women are very important because they are strong in the vote. Women, and especially mothers, really get out and vote a lot. They are very passionate and concerned about their children and the welfare of communities. And so when we get them on board by convincing them of why prohibition is failing and hurting them, that's very beneficial. But women need to speak up, of course, in every which way. But I often compare the marijuana movement to the women's movement in that, we always have to fight for more freedom and liberty. Women are still fighting even though they got the right to vote and they aren't property anymore. But in the marijuana movement, we have to do the same. We have to take whatever we can get and fight for more. So I hope a lot of women out there are going to do the same, stand up tall.
Now that you've regained your freedom, what are your plans in terms of restarting your seed business and your cannabis culture magazine?
Well, I would like to get back into the seed business, but it would be on a much more modest scale. It would only be as a retail component in our stores. And before I was, I was the world's largest seed distributor, really. But that was, 10 years ago, and then, we've been out of business since then, part conditions of the bail for 5 years before my 4.5 years in prison. And also, the seed business was just a fundraising scheme for me. I raised money, gave it away to the movement, $5 million we distributed out there. And now there are hundreds of seed companies, and there's one in every country, or many in every country. They've kind of got that market covered. I mean, there's apparently 1,200 different strains of marijuana you could get from about 40 to 50 companies. And I think that we might even be at the saturation point. So I'm not even sure that a seed business for someone like me coming back into the business is even going to be viable. There are other things that I'm hoping our stores handle, which is like the pain relief creams that have the CBD from cannabis in them. Those things are miracle. You rub them on sore muscles, the pain goes away. I mean, we've seen all sorts of people benefit by it for burns or just aches and pains, tiredness, injuries, ligament. All this CBD lotions are remarkable. So I think there's a lot of new cannabis products that I'd certainly like to have in our store. But mostly that's just the thing. We've got to get to work back where we're from. We've even had to curtail some of our European stops that people are willing to pay to have us go there to speak to, but we don't charge them anything for those speeches other than the cost. So we can tend to end up neglecting our own businesses back home. So we've just got to get to work. you know, and mind the store, as it were, and reestablish some kind of primacy in our industry, like get that back. You know, it's me being gone for nearly 5 years. Kind of, you know, we've got a lot more competition in Canada, a lot more competition around the world. I mean, things are good in that there is a lot of competition, and that means there's economic activity within the cannabis culture going on all over. But it also affects us. You know, we don't get money for free. We have to earn it like everybody else, and we have to earn it by offering good products at a competitive price in a good location. So we can't afford to neglect that.
So, since being free, I've been told that you've been visiting Spain and the cannabis clubs out there. And what is your overall opinion on the CSCs that are available out in Spain?
Well, the cannabis clubs there are quite impressive. They're impressive because they sell to all citizens, so you don't need a medical explanation, which is what is going on in Vancouver. I mean, it's a pretty broad-minded definition of medical in Vancouver, but nonetheless, in Spain you just have to sign up. Now, the restriction is that it's only for citizens of Spain. So even though I as an honored guest, was given some free samples at one point, when I went in and asked if we could buy it later on, we couldn't. So there's limitations on visitors, so people from Great Britain will be limited in that. But also, apparently there's lots of dealers selling to tourists, and there's lots of access anyway. When you've got 200 clubs selling marijuana, you're going to have other street dealers selling good weed. So overall, Barcelona is a gorgeous city to go to and an excellent place to consume marijuana. And there's certainly a lot of There's 4 magazines about marijuana in Spain. They have lots of these marijuana television, video, internet programs going on. They have, you know, various hemp expos all throughout Europe. There's one in Naples coming up on the end of October. I'm going to one in Vienna in the middle of October. So Europe is really coming together. The places where they're furthest behind are France, and to some degree Germany. So Britain isn't as far behind, I think, as France. There's more going on here, and there's more potential for progress here.
What are your favourite strains?
Yeah,
Okay.
what are your favourite strains?
Well, my favorite strains are typically ones you don't find very often. That's why they're a favorite. If they were around all the time, I'd probably think they were more common. But I've only had White Widow probably 4 times in the last 20 years. So, you know, my ideal thing would be to meet some gardener who's growing White Widow. Pure Blueberry, I probably haven't even had that for 10 years.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, a lot of it. But then we've had some amazing things that, you know, like Super Silver Haze we had in Glasgow. We had a lot of cheese variations going on in Ireland, but they were all really good. And what that tells me is that people are growing marijuana properly. I'm convinced that almost any strain is going to be really good if you've got a responsible, diligent grower. Just as a really great strain can be mucked up by someone who rushes it at the end and bags it while it's wet or doesn't dry it and cure it properly. So that's encouraging that whatever weed they're growing here, it's turning out really good.
Just out of interest, what was the first that you smoked when you got out of prison?
I don't know what it was, but it was in Windsor, Ontario, and somebody handed me a joint, and I took 3 puffs of it after speaking for about 90 minutes, and I thought that's all I'll do for the first day. But it was remarkable how quickly I got my tolerance back. I thought it would take me weeks. It took me 48 hours before I could smoke endless amounts of pot without any substantial, like, you know, I wasn't, at no point since I've gotten out of prison have I been on my back saying, oh, I've smoked too much, right?
The true prince of pot.
Yeah, so.
Exactly.
But I didn't smoke in prison for 4.5 years, so people find that remarkable. I remember when I was in that 3-month sentence for marijuana, because they didn't urine test you, then you were free to smoke marijuana, and it was easy to smuggle into that. But even then, we had these joints, we call them pinners, that were the size of a toothpick. I actually marveled how one little flake of cannabis touched another flake, so that you could use absolutely no pot, in my opinion, get a thin joint, and I still got high from it. So that was neat. So you do get high easily under circumstances of deprivation, but the punishment in a U.S. federal prison is so severe for being caught, like getting a bad urine test, because you can be tested at any time, or worse yet, possessing. If you just have a few grams, you can get recharged federally, get 6 to 8 months more in jail, maybe a year. You'll lose 2 months of good time. You'll go to solitary for 3 to 6 months. And then other bad things happen on top of that. You get transferred to another prison, and any movement in the prison is miserable. You're shackled by your legs and your arms, and there's a belt or chains around you. I mean, it's right out of the movies. That part hasn't changed. You know, you feel like a real piece of commodity, a prisoner, you know, when you're chained up like that. And I was released only moments after being unshackled, after 12 hours of traveling all chained up, I got to the Canadian border point, they unshackled me, they pointed to the door, and I came through and it was like going from a world of black and white into color immediately. I saw like 20 cameras, people blew pot smoke in my face instantly. And I use that term, the first thing I said when I got through the border was it smells like freedom, right? Because marijuana does smell like freedom. Whenever you're around people smoking marijuana, it's a sign of either rebellion or freedom, and always in a way a combination of the two, you know, exercising our freedom. Even if we don't legally have it, we ought to have it, and so you know, that's what we're saying when we're smoking a joint. So,
what advice would you give to UK citizens like myself who have a cannabis criminal record?
Well, that's one of the key things about the Canadian legalization that should take place next year in Canada, is that this politician, Justin Trudeau, has promised to expunge our criminal records.
Possession or arrests would be expunged, yeah, that's their...
And well, we would push it to even cultivation or any kind of marijuana.
Push for that.
Because just like when he gets elected, we're going to push for a moratorium immediately on cannabis offenses until he comes up with whatever regime he's going to come up with. So that should be talked about, expunging criminal records, because it does society no good. Just like pot prohibition itself has no benefit to society, only negatives, and we'll talk about that tonight. Having a criminal record on a citizen only hurts both the country and the individual. Because if the individual can't go abroad to work, it inhibits his ability to earn money, which is paying taxes, which is advocating the benefit of his family through increased employment, increased opportunities. So a criminal record for marijuana hurts the nation and it hurts the individual, and there's no reason we should have that. But that's going to need to be put together in a package of decriminalization of some kind. And then eventually the state will come to the conclusion that perhaps we should just regulate and tax this whole thing, get it out in the open. And I mean, ultimately, Britain aspires to an open society, right? With all these cameras everywhere, it's virtually certain that they're recording people buying pot, but there's nothing they can do about it, so why not legalize it anyway, right? And so, but I think this wave, this intellectual wave, is crossing the earth now, and we'll see many jurisdictions legalize in the next 5 years, including more U.S. states, and quite possibly Canada as a whole country next year, and that will have a big impact on the rest of the world too.